We begin not with a story, but with a feeling. It is a feeling as ancient as humanity itself, a quiet, persistent hum beneath the noise of our lives. It is the feeling of being lost. This is not necessarily the physical sensation of misplacing one's bearings in an unfamiliar city or a dense forest, though that can be a sharp and visceral metaphor for it. Rather, this is a deeper, more profound sense of misplacement, a spiritual and existential disorientation that can find us even in the most familiar of surroundings, even when we are surrounded by people we know and love. It is the quiet suspicion that the map we have been given for life does not match the territory we are actually navigating. It is the ache of a homesickness for a home we cannot name, a place of belonging that seems to shimmer just beyond the horizon of our reach. This feeling of lostness can manifest in 1,000 different ways. For some, it is a loud and chaotic rebellion, a desperate flight from the perceived constraints of tradition, family, or faith, a frantic search for identity in the clamor of the new and the novel. It is the belief that freedom lies in a distant country, a place where we can finally shed the skin of expectation and become the person we were always meant to be, only to find that in shedding that skin, we have lost ourselves. For others, this lostness is a quieter, more insidious affair. It is the feeling of being a stranger in one's own life, of meticulously following all the rules, checking all the boxes, and performing all the duties, only to discover a profound hollowness at the core of it all. It is the slow, creeping realization that our obedience has been a form of exile, that in our effort to be good, we have become empty, and that the home we have never left has never truly felt like home. Jesus of Nazareth, a master storyteller, understood this feeling intimately. He saw it in the eyes of the people who flocked to him, the tax collectors, the sinners, the outcasts, the very people who the religious establishment had written off as hopelessly lost. And he saw it, too, in the eyes of that same religious establishment, the Pharisees and the scribes, men who were so convinced they were found, so certain of their own righteousness, that they were perhaps the most lost of all. It was to this mixed audience, an audience of the outwardly lost and the inwardly lost, that he told one of the most powerful stories ever recorded, a story we now call the parable of the prodigal son. But to call it that is to only tell a third of the story. It is truly a story of two lost sons, and more than that, it is the story of a waiting, loving, and scandalously gracious father. It is a story designed not as a simple moral lesson, but as a mirror in which we are invited to find our own reflection, to see the contours of our own lostness, and to glimpse the astonishing possibility of being found. Before we step into the narrative itself, let us pause and consider the power of a parable. A parable is not a fable with a tidy moral at the end. It is not an allegory where every character and object is a one-to-one symbol for something else. A parable is a story that is at once simple and endlessly deep. It is a story that bypasses our intellectual defenses and speaks directly to our hearts, to our imaginations, to that place within us that yearns for meaning and for home. It is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning, a tale of familiar human dynamics, family, inheritance, rebellion, jealousy, forgiveness, that throws open a window onto the very character of God. This story is an invitation. It is an invitation to sit with the characters, to feel what they feel, to walk in their shoes, and to ask ourselves the hard questions. Where have I demanded my inheritance? Where have I journeyed to a distant country? In what pigsty of my own making have I found myself? In what field of joyless labor have I toiled? And most importantly, have I ever truly understood the heart of the Father who waits, who watches, and who runs to welcome the lost home? This is not just a story for them, for a crowd gathered on a dusty Judean hillside 2,000 years ago. It is a story for everyone, in every generation, who has ever felt the ache of being lost and dared to hope that there might be a way back home. The story begins with a simple, yet profoundly resonant declaration. There was a man who had two sons. In this opening stroke, Jesus paints the canvas of a universal human drama. It is the drama of the family, the primary crucible in which our identities are forged, our loves are tested, and our deepest wounds are often inflicted. The man, the father, stands at the center of this domestic world. In the economy of the parable, he is the gravitational force, the source of life, provision, and identity for his two sons. He represents the unwavering, foundational love of God, a love that is patient and steadfast even in the face of rejection and resentment. His presence in the story is initially passive. He is the one who is acted upon, the one whose love will be tested to its limits by the choices of his children. But as the narrative unfolds, we will see that this initial passivity masks an active, yearning, and relentless love that forms the true heart of the story. Then there are the two sons. They are not given names, and this is intentional. They are archetypes, representing two fundamental and opposing ways of relating to the father, and by extension, two fundamental ways of being lost. On the one hand, we have the younger son. He is the figure of open rebellion, the prodigal of the common title. He is driven by a restless desire for independence, a craving for the world that lies beyond the boundaries of his father's land. He embodies the spirit of self-determination that believes happiness is a commodity to be pursued and seized, a treasure to be found in a distant country, far from the obligations and perceived limitations of home. His journey will be one of outward motion, a dramatic departure, and a desperate return. He is lost in the far country, in the wilderness of sensual indulgence and squandered potential. On the other hand, we have the elder son. He is the figure of resentful obedience. He never leaves. He stays at home, works in the field, and fulfills his duties with a grim and joyless diligence. He embodies the spirit of self-righteousness, the belief that love and approval are things to be earned through meticulous service and unwavering adherence to the rules. His lostness is more subtle, more hidden, but no less profound. He is lost in his own home, an exile in the field, a stranger to the Father's heart even as he lives under the Father's roof. These two brothers represent a fundamental schism in the human soul. They are the two paths of alienation from God, the path of the sinner and the path of the Pharisee, the path of breaking the rules and the path of keeping the rules as a means of controlling God and justifying oneself. One seeks life in the chaos of license, the other in the rigidity of legalism, but both are ultimately cut off from the true source of life, which is a relationship of love and trust with the Father. The younger son's request, which comes swiftly in the next verse, is the catalyst that sets the entire drama in motion. And the younger of them said to his father, "Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me." To our modern ears, this might sound like a somewhat impudent, but perhaps understandable request for an advance on his inheritance. But in the cultural context of the ancient Near East, this was an act of breathtaking cruelty and disrespect. A son's inheritance was something he received only after his father had died. By demanding his share of the estate while his father was still alive, the younger son was, in effect, saying, "Father, your existence is an inconvenience to me. I cannot wait for you to be gone. I want what is yours, but I do not want you. Give me now what I will get when you are dead." It was a radical severing of the relationship, a commodification of his father's love, reducing the paternal bond to a mere financial transaction. He was liquidating his relationship for cash. He was choosing the gifts over the giver, the provision over the provider. This request reveals the heart of his lostness, a deep-seated belief that he can be his own man, the architect of his own happiness, if only he can get his hands on the resources and get away from the source. It is the foundational illusion of sin, the whisper that we can be like God, independent and self-sufficient, if we just declare our autonomy and seize what we believe is rightfully ours. The demand hangs in the air, a shocking testament to the younger son's profound alienation from the heart of his father. "Father, give me the share of the property that is coming to me." Let us delve deeper into the mindset that produces such a request. This is more than youthful impatience or a simple desire for adventure. It is a calculated and philosophical statement of intent. At its core, it is a declaration of radical individualism, a belief that the self is the ultimate arbiter of its own destiny and that all relationships, including the most sacred bond of family, are negotiable contracts that can be terminated when they no longer serve the interests of personal fulfillment. The son sees the father's estate not as a shared blessing, a testament to generations of hard work and a promise of future security, but as a resource to be exploited, a pile of assets to be liquidated for the immediate gratification of his desires. He is viewing his birthright through a purely materialistic lens. The land, the livestock, the home. These are not symbols of belonging and heritage. They are obstacles to his freedom. They represent connection, responsibility, and shared history, all of which he is desperate to escape. His request is a desperate attempt to deconstruct his identity as a son and reconstruct it as an independent agent. He wants to be the author of his own story, and he believes the first chapter must begin with a definitive rejection of the story he was born into. This is the seductive allure of the distant country of the mind, the fantasy that we can create a self from scratch, unencumbered by the past, unburdened by obligation. It is the modern dream of the self-made man, a dream that conveniently ignores the fact that we are all, in reality, profoundly made by others, by the love and sacrifice and history that came before us. The younger son is in the grip of a powerful illusion. He believes that the father's presence is a limitation on his freedom. He feels constrained by the rhythms of life at home, by the implicit expectations of sonship, by the watchful, loving eye of the very person who gives him everything. He mistakes the boundaries of love for the bars of a cage. He cannot see that true freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the joyful acceptance of the right constraints. A fish is only free in water. A bird is only free in the air. A son is only truly free, truly himself, in the context of a loving relationship with his father. But the younger son cannot see this. He sees his father's love as a form of control and the estate as his ticket to a life of supposed authenticity, a life where he answers to no one but himself. There is a tragic irony at play here. In his quest for autonomy, he is demanding the very things that will ultimately lead to his enslavement. The wealth he craves will become the instrument of his dissolution. The freedom he seeks will become the empty landscape of his isolation. The independence he desires will lead him to a state of utter and desperate dependence on the charity of strangers in a foreign land. This desire to have the father's things without the father is a precise and powerful diagnosis of the human spiritual condition. We so often want the blessings of God, health, prosperity, happiness, peace, without wanting God himself. We want the benefits of the kingdom without the presence of the king. We treat God as a cosmic vending machine, inserting our prayers or our good behavior in the hope that he will dispense the goods we desire, while we keep him at a safe and manageable distance. We want a God who provides, but not a God who presides. The younger son's demand is the raw, unvarnished expression of this transactional spirituality. He wants to cash out his relationship, to take the assets and run, to be his own God in a universe of his own making. It is the oldest and most tragic miscalculation in the book, the original sin played out once more in the heart of a boy who is about to learn, the hard way, that a life severed from its source is no life at all. The father's reaction to this deeply offensive demand is, perhaps, the most shocking and crucial part of the story's opening act. The text says simply, "And he divided his property between them." The original Greek is even more stark. It says he divided his bios, his life, his livelihood between them. This is not a man grudgingly handing over a bank account. This is a father liquidating his very existence, his life's work, and handing it over to be carried away. It is an act of almost incomprehensible self-emptying love. Let us pause and consider the options the father had. He could have refused. He would have been well within his rights, culturally and morally, to rebuke his son for his audacity, to lecture him on his duty and his disrespect. He could have grown angry, expressing the deep hurt and betrayal that such a request would inevitably cause. He could have tried to reason with him, to persuade him of the foolishness of his plan, to warn him of the dangers that lay ahead. He could have offered a compromise, a small stipend to allow the son to sow his wild oats and return. But the father does none of these things. He simply, quietly, and devastatingly agrees. He grants the request. In this single act, we are given a profound insight into the nature of God's love. It is a love that does not coerce. It is a love that honors the terrible and beautiful gift of free will. The Father understands that a relationship of love cannot be forced. Sonship cannot be a cage, however gilded. If the Son is to stay, he must stay freely. If he is to love, he must love freely. And if he is to leave, he must also be allowed to leave freely. The Father is willing to endure the agony of rejection rather than revoke the freedom that makes a genuine relationship possible. This is the scandalous nature of grace. Grace does not manipulate. Grace does not control. Grace lets go. The Father opens his hands and allows his Son to walk away, even though he knows, with a father's intuition, that the path the Son has chosen leads to destruction. He gives his Son the very resources that will be used to dishonor the family name and break the Father's heart. This act is a form of suffering. The division of the property is a small death for the Father. He is, in a very real sense, enacting the death his Son wished upon him. He is stepping aside, becoming functionally non-existent in his Son's life, so that the Son can live as if he were already gone. Imagine the pain of that transaction. Imagine the signing of the deeds, the counting of the coins, the separation of the livestock. Every part of this process must have been a knife in the Father's heart. And yet he does it. This is a foreshadowing of a greater, ultimate self-giving. The Father's willingness to suffer the consequences of his Son's freedom points toward the cross, where God in Christ would absorb the full consequence of all humanity's rebellion, our collective demand to have the inheritance and be rid of the Father. Furthermore, the text says he divided his living between them. The elder son, who made no such request, also receives his share. He is now the legal owner of his portion of the estate, even as he continues to live and work at home. This is a crucial detail. Both sons are given the inheritance. The Father's generosity is not limited to the rebellious child. But as we will see, possessing the inheritance and living as a beloved son are two very different things. The elder son will have legal title to the property, but he will continue to live with the heart of a slave, unaware of the riches that are already his. The Father's act of unconditional giving, therefore, sets up the central tragedy for both sons. He gives them everything, and in their different ways, they both fail to understand the nature of the gift. One squanders it in a distant country of rebellion, and the other ignores it in the home country of self-righteousness. The Father's love is perfect, but the Son's capacity to receive it is tragically flawed. This is the landscape of the human heart, a place where the overwhelming generosity of God is so often met with the bewildered and broken responses of his children. With his pockets full and his heart set on a manufactured horizon of his own making, the younger son wastes no time. The parable tells us, not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. This sentence, though brief, is laden with immense symbolic weight. The gathering of all he had is a picture of finality and total commitment to his new path. He is not hedging his bets. He is not leaving a safety net. He is cashing in every chip, severing every tie, and consolidating all his assets for a single, decisive purpose, to get as far away from his father as possible. This is a complete and total renunciation of his former life. He is liquidating not just his property, but his identity, his history, and his relationships. The journey itself is more than a simple act of travel. It is a spiritual pilgrimage in reverse. A true pilgrimage is a journey toward a sacred center, a movement toward God, toward home. The son's journey is a flight from the center, a deliberate movement into the periphery, into a state of chosen exile. The far country, or the distant country, as some translations render it, is the key metaphor here. It is not merely a geographical location. It is a state of being. It is a spiritual and psychological space defined by its distance from the Father. It is the land of self-rule, the kingdom of the ego, a place where one can live under the illusion of being one's own God. What does this far country look like? In the son's imagination, It is undoubtedly a place of boundless freedom, endless pleasure, and limitless possibility. It is the place where all his desires can be met without judgment, where his appetites can be sated without consequence. It is a world of superficial connections, where friendships are transactional and based on what one has, not who one is. It is a life lived on the surface, a whirlwind of activity, entertainment, and distraction designed to keep the deeper questions of the soul at bay. It is the land of reckless living, a place where the primary currency is not love or loyalty, but novelty and intensity. The journey to this far country is fueled by a profound naivety. The son believes he is traveling toward life, but he is in fact traveling toward death. He thinks he is moving toward freedom, but he is marching toward slavery. He imagines he is about to find himself, but he is on the verge of losing himself completely. This is the tragic paradox of a life lived in alienation from its source. When we cut ourselves off from the roots that nourish us, we inevitably begin to wither. When we run from the God who is the very ground of our being, we do not find freedom, we find disintegration. This journey is one that resonates deeply with the modern experience. We live in a culture that perpetually beckons us to our own far countries. The promise of the far country is whispered to us through 1,000 different channels. Find your bliss, live your truth, follow your passion, be the master of your destiny. These are not inherently bad sentiments, but when they are divorced from a grounding in relationship, community, and a transcendent source of meaning, they become the siren song of the far country. They can lead us to believe that the good life is one of perpetual self-invention, of cutting ties with anything that feels restrictive, of pursuing a form of happiness that is ultimately self-centered and, therefore, hollow. The far country is any place, any relationship, any career, or any mindset where we attempt to live as if God does not exist, or at least as if he is not relevant to our daily affairs. It is the place where we are the sole authors of the moral code, the ultimate arbiters of right and wrong. It is a kingdom of one, and its ruler is an isolated and fragile self. The younger son, full of the confidence that only unseasoned wealth and unexamined desire can provide, strides boldly into this territory, completely unaware that the very ground beneath his feet is designed to collapse, that the feast he is about to enjoy is a prelude to a devastating famine. He is a king for a day, on his way to a pigsty he cannot yet imagine. Once he arrives in the far country, the younger son embarks on a lifestyle that the parable describes with a single, devastating phrase, and there he squandered his property in reckless living. The Greek word translated as reckless or riotous living is asotos, a powerful and evocative term. It doesn't just mean living wastefully or extravagantly. It implies a life that is fundamentally unsavable, a life that is being poured out and scattered with no hope of being gathered up again. It describes a state of being that is so dissolute and disintegrated that it has lost its center, its coherence, and its purpose. His life has become a centrifugal force, flinging his inheritance and his very soul into the void. Let us try to imagine the texture of this life. It is likely a whirlwind of sensory indulgence. The son, flush with cash and free from any form of accountability, would have thrown himself into every pleasure the far country had to offer. There would have been lavish parties, expensive clothes, fine food and drink, and the fleeting company of those who are drawn to wealth like moths to a flame. His days and nights would have been a blur of activity, a constant pursuit of the next thrill, the next peak experience. He would have surrounded himself with people who affirmed his choices, who celebrated his freedom, and who helped him spend his money. These are the fair-weather friends of the far country, the companions whose loyalty lasts only as long as the wine is flowing and the bills are being paid. But beneath the glittering surface of this hedonistic lifestyle, a deeper, more insidious process is at work. The son is not just squandering his property, he is squandering himself. Every act of dissipation, every moment spent in the pursuit of fleeting pleasure, is a chipping away at his true identity. He who is a son, a man of heritage and belonging, is slowly becoming a ghost, a hollowed-out shell defined only by his appetites. The reckless living is a frantic attempt to fill a spiritual void with material things and sensory experiences. But the void is infinite, and the resources are finite. It is a fool's errand. The more he pours into the emptiness, the larger the emptiness becomes. The initial thrill of liberation gives way to the tedious business of maintaining the high. The pleasures that once seemed so potent begin to require higher and higher doses to produce the same effect. A weariness sets in, a soul sickness that no amount of entertainment can cure. This is the law of diminishing returns that governs the far country. A life dedicated solely to the self ultimately consumes the self. In his desperate attempt to live a life that is full, he is creating a life that is profoundly empty. He is trading the deep, abiding joy of communion with his Father for the shallow, transient highs of a life without a center. He is exchanging the security of being a beloved son for the fragile and temporary status of being the life of the party. The parable's description is brief, but its implications are vast. The squandering of the inheritance represents the waste of all the gifts that God has given us when they are used for purely selfish ends. Our talents, our time, our energy, our resources, these are all part of the inheritance. When they're used in service of the ego, in the pursuit of a life apart from the giver, they are ultimately squandered. They are poured into a leaky vessel, scattered on the wind, and they leave us with nothing but the bitter taste of regret. The son's reckless living is a perfect portrait of a life lived without a why. He has the how, the money, but he has no transcendent purpose to guide him. His life is a series of disconnected moments, a string of pleasures with no narrative thread to hold them together. It is, in the words of the philosopher, a life of sound and fury, signifying nothing. And as he will soon discover, when the external resources run out, a life built on nothing cannot stand. The party in the far country is about to come to an abrupt and brutal end. The music will stop, the friends will vanish, and the son will be left alone to face the devastating consequences of his choices. The logic of the far country is relentless and unforgiving. A life built on the finite resources of the self and the fleeting pleasures of the world is a house built on sand. And inevitably, the storm comes. The parable marks this turning point with stark simplicity. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. This is a powerful convergence of crises. The son's internal famine, the emptiness he has been trying to fill with reckless living, is now perfectly mirrored by an external famine. The well has run dry, both inside and out. The first part of the verse, when he had spent everything, marks the end of his self-sufficiency. His great project of independence has failed. The resources he believed would guarantee his freedom have vanished, spent on experiences that have left him with nothing but a portfolio of fading memories and a profound sense of lack. The money, which had been his shield, his status symbol, and his source of power, is gone. And with it, all the so-called friends and admirers have undoubtedly disappeared as well. He is now utterly alone, stripped of the very things he had built his new identity upon. He is no longer the wealthy, charismatic man of the world. He is just a man, and a broke one at that. As if this internal crisis were not enough, an external cataclysm strikes. A severe famine arose in that country. The world that had seemed so full of promise, so ripe with opportunity and pleasure, now reveals its true nature. It is a fickle and unreliable place. The very system that had facilitated his indulgence now turns against him. The famine is not just a random agricultural disaster. It is a metaphor for the inherent emptiness of a world divorced from its creator. The far country, the world of materialism and self-gratification, will always, eventually, lead to a state of famine. It promises satisfaction but delivers starvation. It offers life but leads to death. The party is over not just for the son, but for everyone around him. The system itself is bankrupt. This external famine serves a crucial narrative and theological purpose. It ensures that there is no easy way out for the son. He cannot simply get a job and start over. He cannot rely on the social safety nets or the charity of his former companions, for they are all caught in the same crisis. The famine strips away all his illusions of control. It forces him to confront the absolute poverty of his situation. There is no one to bail him out, no resource he can tap, no clever scheme he can devise. He is brought to a state of complete and utter helplessness. This is often the painful but necessary ground where grace begins to work. As long as we believe we have other options, as long as we think we can solve our own problems, we are often deaf to the call of home. It is in the famine, in the moment when we have spent everything and the world around us offers nothing, that we are finally forced to look up. The son began to be in need. This is a masterstroke of understatement. It captures the initial, dawning horror of his predicament. The gnawing in his stomach is a physical manifestation of the gnawing in his soul. The need for bread is a reflection of his deeper need for meaning, for connection, for forgiveness. He who left his father's house, a place of overflowing abundance, to avoid any sense of neediness, now finds himself in a state of absolute need. His quest for independence has ironically led him to the most desperate and humiliating state of dependence. The famine is the great equalizer. It strips away his pride, his arrogance, and his carefully constructed persona. It reduces him to his most basic, elemental self, a hungry, lost, and frightened creature a long, long way from home. He is not yet ready to turn back. Pride is a stubborn thing, and the memory of his arrogant departure is still fresh. But the famine has initiated a process of humbling, a painful education in the reality of his condition. The far country has shown him its true face, and it is a face of scarcity, indifference, and death. Faced with the twin calamities of personal bankruptcy and a nationwide famine, the younger son makes a final, desperate attempt to survive on the world's terms. He is not yet ready to admit the full scope of his failure or to consider the journey home. His pride still dictates his actions. And so, the parable tells us, he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. This is the son's rock bottom, a moment of profound and multi-layered degradation. Let us dissect the horror of this scene. He hired himself out, or in some translations, he joined himself or glued himself to a citizen of that country. The language suggests a desperate act of clinging, of attaching himself to a new master in the hope of survival. He who left his father's house to be his own master is now forced to become a servant, a bonded laborer, to a foreigner in a hostile land. His grand experiment in autonomy has ended in the most complete and abject form of servitude. The master he finds is a citizen of the far country, a perfect embodiment of the world's cold, transactional nature. This man feels no compassion for the son. He does not offer him a place at his table or a bed in his house. He sees him merely as a resource to be exploited, a pair of hands to do the most degrading work imaginable. The world's solution to our desperation is rarely grace. It is exploitation. And the work he is given is the ultimate humiliation. He is sent into the fields to feed pigs. For any person, this would be a wretched and filthy job. But for a Jewish man, it was a catastrophe of cultural and religious significance. Pigs were considered unclean animals according to Jewish law. To be in such close contact with them, to live among them and handle their food, was to be in a state of profound ritual impurity. It was to be utterly cut off from his community, his heritage, and his God. He has not only lost his wealth and his status, he has lost his very identity as a child of the covenant. He is now, in every sense of the word, an outcast. The sensory experience of this moment must have been overwhelming. The stench of the sty, the grunting and squealing of the animals, the filth under his fingernails, the mud caking his tattered clothing. This physical squalor is a perfect externalization of his internal state. His soul is in a pigsty. He has traded the dignity of his father's house for the degradation of a stranger's field. The ultimate irony is that his hunger becomes so severe that he longs to eat the very food he is giving to the pigs. He was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. The carob pods were a coarse, barely edible substance, the food of last resort for animals. That he would crave them reveals the depth of his starvation. He now sees the food of unclean beasts as a feast. He has been so dehumanized by his circumstances that he would gladly share a trough with swine. Yet even this small, desperate desire is denied him. No one gave him anything. This is the final, brutal lesson of the far country. Its compassion is non-existent. Its charity has run out. In his moment of greatest need, the world he chose over his father turns its back on him completely. He is invisible. He is worthless. He is utterly and completely alone. This is the end of the road. There is no lower place to fall. He has been stripped of everything: his money, his friends, his dignity, his identity, and even the hope of a handful of pig's food. His rebellion has led him to a place where he is less valued than the unclean animals he serves. It is a moment of total and catastrophic failure. But it is precisely here, in the darkest and most desolate corner of the far country, amidst the filth and the despair of the pigsty, that the first glimmer of light is about to dawn. It is only when we have been stripped of all our self-made illusions and brought to the end of our own resources that we are finally in a position to come to ourselves and remember the way home, in the depths of his degradation, surrounded by the filth of the pigsty and consumed by a hunger that gnawed at his very soul. Something miraculous happens. The narrative pivots on a single, luminous phrase. But when he came to himself. This is the turning point of the entire story, the moment when the downward spiral of disintegration is arrested and the slow, arduous journey of return begins. Let us meditate on the profound meaning of this phrase. If he came to himself, it implies that he had been, up until this point, beside himself. His time in the far country, his life of reckless squandering, was a form of temporary insanity, a prolonged delirium of the soul. He was not acting in his right mind, because he had forgotten who he truly was. He was living a lie, playing the part of a wealthy libertine, a self-made man of the world. But it was all a frantic performance, a desperate attempt to ignore the truth of his identity, which was, and always had been, that he was a son. To be beside oneself is to be alienated from one's true nature, to be driven by appetites and illusions rather than by reason and love. It is to live in the fog of the ego's demands, chasing ghosts of happiness in a land of shadows. The son, in his pursuit of freedom, had become a slave to his passions, and this slavery had driven him out of his own mind. The pigsty, in its brutal and uncompromising reality, serves as a harsh but effective form of shock therapy. The stench, the hunger, the utter loneliness, these things cut through the fog of his self-deception. The illusions of the far country could not survive in the face of such stark and visceral suffering. The pain of his current reality became so great that it finally woke him up from the dream of his rebellion. And so, he came to himself. What does this awakening entail? It is, first and foremost, the return of memory. In the midst of the filth, his mind travels back across the distance he has created, back to his father's house. He begins to remember a different reality. He remembers a home where there is order, dignity, and abundance. The memory is not abstract. It is concrete and specific. How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? This is the first step toward salvation. Realistic comparison of his chosen reality with the reality he rejected. He sees with sudden, painful clarity the utter foolishness of his choice. The lowest servant in his father's house lives in a state of abundance that he, the son, cannot even dream of in his current condition. Memory leads to reason. For the first time since he left home, he begins to think clearly, to assess his situation logically. The insanity of his pride gives way to the sanity of his desperation. He realizes that his current path leads only to one destination: death by starvation in a foreign land. The prodigal's journey was a flight from reality, and his coming to himself is a return to reality. It is the moment he stops lying to himself. He stops blaming the famine, or the citizen who hired him, or bad luck. He begins, implicitly, to understand that he is the author of his own misery. This awakening is not yet full repentance, but it is the essential prerequisite for it. It is the dawning of self-awareness. It is the moment a lost person finally admits that he is lost. He is not yet thinking about his father's love or his own betrayal in relational terms. His initial motivation is purely pragmatic, survival. He is driven by his empty stomach. But God, in His grace, is not proud. He will use even our most basic, creaturely needs to begin the process of drawing us back to Himself. The hunger for bread becomes the catalyst for a much deeper, spiritual hunger. The coming to Himself is the rediscovery of his identity, however fractured and shame-ridden it may be. In remembering his father's house, he is forced to remember that he is his father's son. He may be a disgraced son, a disobedient son, a foolish son, but a son nonetheless. This glimmer of his true identity, flickering in the darkness of the pigsty, is the single point of light that will guide him on the long road home. It is the moment the exile begins to dream of the kingdom, the moment the dead man begins to feel the first stirrings of life. The awakening in the pigsty is not a passive moment of realization. It is immediately followed by a decision and a plan. The return of reason gives birth to a newfound resolve. The son, having come to his senses, does not wallow in self-pity. Instead, he begins to formulate a strategy for his return, complete with a rehearsed speech. I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants. This speech is a masterpiece of contrition, a perfectly crafted confession that reveals both the depth of his newfound clarity and the lingering limitations of his understanding. Let's dissect it piece by piece, for it tells us everything about his state of mind. First, there is the resolve. I will arise and go to my father. This is a declaration of intent, a commitment to action. It is the verbalization of repentance, which in its original meaning is metanoia, a change of mind that leads to a change of direction. He understands that realization without action is useless. He must physically turn around and begin the arduous journey home. He must translate his internal awakening into external motion. Next comes the confession itself, which is twofold. Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. This is a crucial and profound admission. He understands that his transgression was not merely a personal failure or a poor financial decision. It was a sin, a violation of a moral and spiritual order. He sinned against heaven, acknowledging that his actions were an offense against God Himself, against the divine order of things. And he sinned before you, a direct and personal admission of the pain and dishonor he has brought upon his own father. He takes full responsibility. There are no excuses, no attempts to share the blame. It is a simple, unadorned statement of his guilt. This is the bedrock of true repentance. Following the confession is a statement of his perceived consequence. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. This demonstrates a profound and appropriate sense of his own unworthiness. He understands that he has forfeited his rights as a son. He has broken the covenant of family, and he recognizes that he has no claim to the privileges of sonship. He sees the chasm that his actions have created between himself and his father, and he rightly concludes that he cannot bridge that gap on his own merits. He has, in his own eyes, permanently demoted himself from the status of son to something less. Finally, he proposes a solution, a path to potential reinstatement. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Here, we see the limits of his vision. While his repentance is genuine and his self-awareness is sharp, his understanding of his father's heart is still deeply flawed. His plan is based on a transactional mindset, the same mindset that led him to demand his inheritance in the first place, though now it is operating in reverse. He believes he must earn his way back into his father's good graces. He cannot conceive of a grace that would restore him to sonship freely and unconditionally. His best-case scenario, the highest hope he can muster, is to be allowed to work off his debt, to trade his labor for food and shelter. He is approaching his father not as a son returning to a loving parent, but as a disgraced employee applying for a menial position. He is still thinking in terms of merit and wages, of justice and earned acceptance. The category of pure, unmerited grace is beyond his imagination. This rehearsed speech is a perfect representation of how we so often approach God. We come with our genuine sorrow for our sins, our keen sense of unworthiness, and our well-intentioned plans to make it up to Him. We promise to do better, to try harder, to become His servants, if only He will take us back. We come with our deals and our bargains, hoping to negotiate a new contract. What we so often fail to grasp, and what the Son is about to discover, is that the Father is not interested in our contracts. He is not looking for hired servants. He is looking for His lost children. The Son's speech is good. It is humble. It is necessary, but it is ultimately inadequate. It is a script written from the perspective of the pigsty, and it will soon be rendered obsolete by a love that operates on a completely different and far more extravagant economy. Having made his decision and rehearsed his speech, the Son acts. The parable tells us, with powerful simplicity, "And he arose and came to his father." This single sentence encapsulates what must have been a long, arduous, and emotionally fraught journey. To arise from the pigsty was not just a physical act of getting to his feet. It was a resurrection of the will, an act of defiance against the despair and inertia that had held him captive. He had to overcome the immense gravity of his shame, the paralyzing fear of rejection, and the sheer physical exhaustion of his starved and broken body. Every step on that road back home was an argument against the voices in his head that surely told him it was hopeless, that he would never be forgiven, that he was better off dying in the filth than facing the righteous anger of the family he had so publicly disgraced. This journey home is the physical embodiment of his repentance. It is the long, slow, painful process of turning one's back on the far country and setting one's face toward the Father. Let us imagine the scenes that must have played out on that road. He would have been a wretched sight, clothed in rags, emaciated from hunger, caked in the filth of the pigsty. He would have been unrecognizable to those who knew him in his days of wealth and bravado. He would have been an object of pity to some, of scorn to others. He likely had to beg for scraps of food, to sleep in ditches, to endure the elements. This was a journey of profound humbling, a stripping away of the last vestiges of his pride. With every mile, the distance to his father's house grew shorter, but his anxiety must have grown greater. He would have replayed his rehearsed speech over and over, polishing it, hoping it would be enough to earn him a place, however lowly. He would have been filled with a volatile mixture of hope and dread. The hope was rooted in the memory of his father's house, a place of abundance and order. The dread was rooted in the memory of his own actions, the magnitude of his betrayal. He knew he deserved nothing but condemnation. His hope was not in his father's love. He could not yet dare to imagine that, but merely in his father's potential pity, his willingness to take him on as a hired hand. Contrast this journey with his first journey, the one he took away from home. That first journey was undertaken with speed and excitement. Not many days later. It was a journey of arrogance, his wagons laden with his inheritance, his heart full of the illusion of his own power and importance. He was a man of substance, a man going out to conquer the world. This return journey is the complete opposite. It is slow, painful, and hesitant. He is a man with nothing, a beggar, returning not in triumph, but in total and utter defeat. He is not coming home to claim a victory, but to plead for mercy. This walk is the crucible in which his repentance is tested and proven. It would have been so easy to give up, to turn back, to succumb to the shame and disappear into anonymity. But he keeps walking, one painful step after another. His hunger for bread is now matched by a deeper hunger, a hunger for home, a hunger for the possibility of a life that is more than the slow death of the pigsty. This is the dark night of the soul for the prodigal, the lonely walk through the valley of the shadow of his own failure. He is walking from the kingdom of death toward the kingdom of life, but he does not know for certain that the gates will be open to him. He is walking on the fragile currency of a desperate hope, a hope born in the darkest of places. And as he walks, unaware and unseen by him, a pair of eyes is scanning the horizon, a heart is waiting and watching, and a love that he cannot yet comprehend is preparing to run to him and bridge the final, terrible distance between the Father's house and the lost son, The narrative now shifts its perspective, moving from the struggling son on the road to the waiting father at home. The next verse contains one of the most moving and theologically rich descriptions of God's character in all of Scripture. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him. This short clause is a window into the heart of God, and it changes everything. Let us linger here and unpack the immense significance of these words. While he was still a long way off, this tells us that the son was not yet home. He was not yet at the gate, polished and presentable, ready to deliver his carefully rehearsed speech. He was a distant figure on the horizon, likely an unidentifiable speck to most. He was still dirty, still in his rags, still bearing all the marks of his shame and his time in the far country. He was, in other words, still in his sin, still in his brokenness. He had not yet done anything to make himself worthy or acceptable. He had only done one thing. He had turned his face toward home and started walking. And it was there, in that state of distant, broken, and hesitant return, that the Father's grace met him. The Father's love did not wait for the Son to clean himself up. It did not wait for him to arrive and prove the sincerity of his repentance. It did not wait for the apology. The Father's love went out to meet the Son precisely where he was, in all his wretchedness. This radically redefines the nature of grace. Grace is not a reward for arrival. It is the power that enables our journey. The Father seeing him implies that the Father was looking for him. This was not a chance encounter. The Father was not simply sitting on his porch when he happened to glance up and see a familiar figure. The language suggests a vigil, a daily practice of watching. We can imagine this Father, every morning and every evening, going to a high point on his property, his hand shielding his eyes from the sun, scanning the dusty road that led to the far country. He was waiting. He was hoping. He was yearning for his son's return. This is not the picture of a distant, impassive God, tapping his fingers and waiting for us to get our act together. This is the picture of a passionately engaged God, a God who actively seeks and searches for the lost. His love is not a static attribute. It is a dynamic, forward-moving, and relentless force. He is the shepherd who leaves the 99 to search for the one lost sheep. He is the woman who sweeps the entire house to find the one lost coin. And he is the father who keeps a constant, hopeful watch for a son who has done everything to break his heart. The Father saw him. In a world where the Son had been rendered invisible by his poverty and shame, where no one gave him anything, he is finally seen. And he is not just seen, he is recognized. The Father is able to see past the filth, the rags, and the emaciation. He is able to look at this broken wreck of a man and see not the prodigal, not the failure, not the disgrace, but only one thing: my son. This is the gaze of perfect love. It is a love that does not define us by our worst moments, our most shameful failures, or our most rebellious choices. It is a love that sees through all the layers of sin and brokenness to the true identity that lies beneath, the identity of a beloved child. This single moment, before any action is taken, is the gospel in miniature. We are still a long way off, caught in our own far countries, mired in our own pigsties. We have not made ourselves presentable, but the Father is already looking for us. He sees us not as we are in our sin, but as we are in his heart. And this seeing, this recognition, is the beginning of our salvation. It is the love that precedes our repentance, the grace that anticipates our return, the divine initiative that comes running to us while we are still just a distant, hopeful silhouette on the road home. The moment the Father sees his Son, a cascade of emotion and action is unleashed, a beautiful and powerful sequence that demonstrates the very essence of divine love. The verse continues, and he felt compassion and ran and embraced him and kissed him. In these four distinct movements, feeling, running, embracing, and kissing, the Father systematically demolishes every fear the Son could have had and provides a breathtaking portrait of restorative grace. First, he felt compassion. This is the wellspring from which all the subsequent actions flow. The Greek word here is splanchnizomai, a term that denotes a deep, visceral, gut-wrenching feeling of pity and love. It is not a detached, intellectual sympathy. It is a love that feels the pain of the other in one's own bowels, in the very core of one's being. The father looks at the wretched figure of his son, and he is not filled with anger or disgust or a sense of, "I told you so." He is filled with an overwhelming, heart-shattering compassion. He sees not the sin but the suffering. He feels the hunger, the shame, and the pain of his child as if it were his own. This compassion is the engine of the gospel. It is the character of God, who, seeing humanity in its lost and broken state, is moved from the depths of his being to act on our behalf. Compassion, for the Father, is not a passive emotion. It immediately translates into radical action. And ran. This is perhaps the most scandalous and culturally shocking detail in the entire parable. In ancient Near Eastern culture, it was considered deeply undignified for an elderly patriarch, a man of status and honor, to run. He would have had to gather up his robes, exposing his legs, which was an act of public humiliation. A man of his stature was expected to walk with a slow, measured, and dignified pace. But the Father, in his compassionate love, shatters these cultural expectations. He casts his dignity aside. He does not care what the servants or the neighbors will think. His only thought is for his son. He runs to close the distance that sin and shame have created. He runs to shorten the son's long, agonizing walk of shame. He runs to ensure that the son does not have to face the potential scorn of the villagers or the servants alone. He runs to communicate, in the most dramatic and unmistakable way possible, that he is not angry, but eager, that he is not waiting to condemn, but longing to welcome. This act of running is a physical expression of the eagerness of God's grace. God does not meet us halfway. He runs the full distance to meet us where we are. Next, he embraced him. The Greek word for embrace here suggests falling upon his neck, a powerful, almost desperate hug. This is not a formal, tentative handshake. It is a full-bodied, all-encompassing embrace of acceptance. In this single gesture, the Father communicates total forgiveness and reconciliation. He pulls the son's filthy, pigsty-smelling body close to his own clean robes. He does not shrink from the son's uncleanness. He absorbs it. He covers the son's shame with his own honor. This embrace is a physical sign that the relationship is fully restored, that the chasm has been closed. Finally, and kissed him. The kissing here is likely not a single peck on the cheek, but a repeated, fervent kissing, a sign of deep affection and intimate welcome. In that culture, a kiss from a father was a sign of forgiveness and peace. It was the definitive gesture of restoration. It is crucial to note the order of events. The father runs, embraces, and kisses his son before the son has a chance to say a single word of his rehearsed confession. The forgiveness precedes the apology. The acceptance is given before the conditions are met. The restoration is a free and unconditional gift. The father's actions completely overwhelm and dismantle the son's transactional framework. The son was coming home to negotiate for the position of a servant. The father, by his actions, has already, without a word being spoken, reinstated him to the position of a beloved son. This is the radical, preemptive, and utterly overwhelming nature of God's grace. Overwhelmed by his father's shocking display of affection, the younger son finally finds his voice and begins to deliver the speech he has been rehearsing on the long road home. And the son said to him, "Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son." He manages to get out the confession and the acknowledgement of his unworthiness, the parts of his speech that are rooted in the genuine realization of his own failure. These words are true, they are humble, and they are necessary. It is important for the son to articulate his repentance, not to earn his father's forgiveness, but to participate in the reality of the reconciliation that is already taking place. His confession is not a transaction to secure grace, but a response to the grace that has already been lavished upon him. He is agreeing with the truth about himself, the truth that his father's love has already covered. But something remarkable happens in the telling. The speech is cut short. The son never gets to the final, strategic part of his plan, the line he had devised as his only hope. Treat me as one of your hired servants. Before he can finish, before he can make his pathetic and ill-conceived bargain, the father interrupts him. He turns away from the son and issues a series of rapid-fire commands to his servants, completely overriding the son's proposal and rendering it irrelevant. This interruption is of profound theological significance. The father is not interested in the son's plan for self-atonement. He is not interested in a deal that would place his son on a probationary, works-based footing. The very idea of his son becoming a servant in his own house is unthinkable, an insult to the father's love. The father's grace is not a negotiation, it is a declaration. The relationship he desires is not that of a master and a servant, but that of a father and a son. By cutting the speech short, the father is emphatically rejecting the son's transactional worldview. He is teaching his son, and us, that we cannot bargain our way back into the kingdom. We cannot offer our works, our promises of good behavior, or our willingness to accept a lesser status in exchange for acceptance. The father's house has no servants' quarters for his children. There is only one status available: full, unmerited, and glorious sonship. The son's limited imagination, shaped by the shame of the pigsty, could only conceive of a justice-based system where he would have to work to pay off his debt. The father operates on a completely different system, an economy of grace where debts are not paid but forgiven, where status is not earned but bestowed as a free gift. The interrupted confession reveals the vast gulf between our best attempts at religion and God's radical grace. We come to God with our carefully constructed plans for self-improvement, our promises to do better, our proposals for how we can make ourselves worthy. We, like the son, want to have some role in our own salvation, some small part to play that allows us to retain a sliver of our dignity. But the father interrupts our religious speech-making. He waves away our pathetic bargains and our self-serving proposals. He is not interested in our worthiness. He is interested in our willingness to be loved. He wants us to stop trying to earn what he is desperate to give away for free. The son's speech was the product of his coming to himself. It was the best that human reason and repentance could produce. But the father's actions are the product of a love that transcends human reason. The son's plan was to move from the pigsty to the servants' quarters. The father's plan is to move him from the pigsty to the banquet hall. The son was hoping for employment. The father is throwing a party. The interrupted speech is a powerful symbol of the gospel. The law, with its demands and its system of merit, is silenced by the declaration of grace. Our attempts to justify ourselves are rendered moot by the justification that is offered to us in Christ. The son is stopped mid-sentence because the father has a better word to speak, a word of unconditional acceptance, a word of total restoration, a word that will transform a ragged beggar on the road into a fully honored son in the house. The father, having interrupted his son's inadequate confession, turns to the servants and issues a series of swift, joyful commands that serve as a public and tangible demonstration of the son's full restoration. But the father said to his servants, "Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet." Each of these three items, the robe, the ring, and the shoes, is laden with rich symbolic meaning. Together, they constitute a complete and undeniable reversal of the son's condition, moving him from a state of shame and destitution to one of honor and belonging. First, the father commands, "Bring quickly the best robe and put it on him." The command is urgent. Quickly, there is no time to waste. The father is eager to cover his son's shame. The best robe would have been a special garment, likely the father's own, reserved for honored guests or special occasions. It was a sign of great distinction. By clothing his son in this robe, the father is doing several things at once. He is physically covering the filth and the rags of the far country. The robe replaces the stench of the pigsty with the fragrance of home. It is a visual representation of forgiveness, the covering of sin. The son's past is literally being hidden from view, replaced by the splendor of the father's own garment. This is a beautiful picture of the righteousness of Christ, which is given to us as a free gift, covering our own unrighteousness. Furthermore, The robe restores the son's honor. He had been stripped of all dignity, but now he is being publicly honored by the head of the household. The father is making a statement to the entire community. This is not a disgraced outcast. This is my beloved son, worthy of the highest honor I can bestow. Next, the father says, "Put a ring on his hand." In that culture, a signet ring was a symbol of authority and sonship. It was used to stamp documents, to conduct business, and to signify the wearer's identity and power as a representative of the family. The son had squandered his financial inheritance, but with this ring, the father is restoring his authority. He is trusting him again. He is giving him back his access to the family's wealth and his position as a true son, with all the rights and privileges that entails. This is a radical act of trust. The father is not putting the son on probation. He is not saying, "Let's see if you can be trusted this time." He is immediately and completely restoring his son to a position of power and familial identity. The ring on his finger is a constant, tangible reminder that he is no longer a slave to circumstance, but a son with a name and an inheritance. Finally, the father commands, "And shoes on his feet." This may seem like a minor detail to us, but it was of immense significance. In that society, slaves and the very poor went barefoot. Only sons and free men wore shoes or sandals. The son, in his rehearsed speech, was preparing to ask for the status of a servant. With this simple command, the father emphatically and definitively rejects that possibility. The shoes are a declaration of freedom and sonship. They signify that he is a member of the family, that he belongs, that he has the right to walk in the house not as a hired hand, but as a cherished son. Each of these gifts systematically addresses and reverses a specific aspect of the son's degradation. The rags of his shame are replaced by the robe of honor. The powerlessness of his poverty is replaced by the ring of authority. The status of a barefooted slave is replaced by the shoes of a free son. The father is not just forgiving the son. He is completely reclothing him, re-identifying him, and re-establishing him in his rightful place. It is a total and extravagant restoration, executed with joyful urgency, leaving no doubt in anyone's mind about the son's new status. This is the nature of God's grace. It is not a partial or reluctant forgiveness. It is a lavish, overwhelming, and complete restoration to the full status of beloved children. The father's extravagant welcome does not end with the bestowing of the robe, the ring, and the shoes. The restoration must be celebrated. It is not enough for the son to be privately forgiven. His return must be publicly acknowledged with a feast of epic proportions. The father's next command reveals the depth of his joy. "And bring the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and be merry." This was not an ordinary meal. The fatted calf was not part of the daily menu. It was an animal that was specially raised and fattened for a major celebration, such as a wedding or the visit of a highly distinguished guest. It represented the most lavish and joyful hospitality a household could offer. By calling for the fatted calf, the father is declaring that this is one of the most important days in the life of his family. He is elevating his son's return to the level of a momentous and historic occasion. This is a radical reframing of the event. From the son's perspective, his return was a moment of deep shame and humiliation. He was crawling back in defeat. But from the father's perspective, it is a moment of unparalleled joy and triumph. The father is not just relieved, he is ecstatic. He wants the entire community to share in his happiness. The celebration is not a quiet affair for the immediate family. The call to eat and be merry implies a large, festive gathering with music and dancing, as we later learn from the elder brother. This public nature of the celebration is crucial. It serves to officially and publicly reintegrate the younger son back into the community. Any shame or stigma associated with his departure and failure is washed away in the tide of his father's joyous welcome. The father is essentially throwing a party to announce to the world, "My son is home, and he is fully restored to his place of honor. There is no stain on his name." This is the opposite of the scarlet letter approach to sin and repentance. The father does not require a period of public penance. He throws a party. This speaks volumes about the character of God. Our repentance, our return to Him, is not a cause for heavenly probation, but for a heavenly party. The parables that immediately precede this one, the parables of the lost sheep and the lost coin, both end with the finder calling their friends and neighbors to rejoice with me. Jesus concludes them by saying, "Just so, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of the angels of God over one sinner who repents." The party for the prodigal son is the great earthly symbol of this heavenly reality. God's response to our return is not a grudging acceptance, but an explosion of joy. He is the host who kills the fatted calf, the one who rejoices more over the one who is lost and is now found than over the 99 who never went astray. This concept is profoundly counterintuitive to our human way of thinking, which is so often based on merit, fairness, and earned rewards. The son did nothing to deserve this feast. In fact, he did everything to deserve the opposite. He deserved to be punished, to be shunned, to be made to work to repay the fortune he squandered. But the Father operates on a different logic entirely, the logic of grace. In the economy of grace, restoration is always a cause for the most extravagant celebration. The fatted calf is a symbol of life triumphing over death, of abundance triumphing over scarcity. The son comes home from a land of famine, where he was starving for even the pods of the pigs, and he is welcomed with the richest food the house can provide. This is a picture of the overwhelming, superabundant generosity of God. When He forgives completely. When He restores lavishly. He does not just give us what we need to survive. He invites us to a feast. The party is the ultimate expression of the Father's love, a love that not only forgives the past but celebrates the future, a love that turns a story of shame into a song of joy. The Father, in the midst of His joyful commands, provides the reason, the profound theological justification for this extravagant celebration. He declares to His household the core meaning of this event. "For this my son was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." With these two powerful couplets, the Father elevates the narrative from a simple story of a rebellious boy to a cosmic drama of death and resurrection, of lostness and redemption. This is the Father's gospel, the good news according to the heart of God, and it serves as the central thesis of the entire parable. Let us unpack the immense weight of these metaphors. "For this my son was dead." The Father is not speaking of a physical death. He is describing a state of spiritual death. To be in the far country, squandering one's inheritance, serving pigs, and being alienated from the Father's love is to be dead. It is a life that is cut off from its source, a branch severed from the vine. It is a state of being in which one's true identity is lost, one's potential is squandered, and one's existence is a hollow imitation of true life. Spiritual death is not an event that happens after we stop breathing. It is a condition we can inhabit here and now. It is a life lived for the self, a life of disintegration and meaninglessness, a life in the pigsty of our own making. This is how the Father viewed His Son's time away, not as a youthful rebellion or a phase he was going through, but as a period of profound and tragic death, and is alive again. The return of the Son is nothing less than a resurrection. His coming to Himself was the first flicker of a heartbeat. His journey home was the slow and arduous process of coming back to life. And His reception by the Father is the final, definitive breath of new life being breathed into Him. To be embraced by the Father, to be clothed in His robe, to be welcomed into His house, is to be brought from death into life. Life, in this sense, is defined as a restored relationship with the Father. It is a life of belonging, of purpose, of being nourished and sustained by the source of all life. This is the great promise of the gospel, not just the forgiveness of sins, but a radical transformation from a state of death to a state of vibrant, abundant, and eternal life. The second couplet reinforces the first. He was lost and is found. To be lost is to be disoriented, to have no sense of direction, no map, no home. It is to wander in the wilderness of the far country, pursuing paths that lead nowhere, seeking satisfaction in things that can never satisfy. The lost son had no identity apart from his fleeting pleasures and his dwindling bank account. When those were gone, he was nothing. He was a man without a story, a man without a place in the world. To be found is to be brought back into the story, to be given a place, an identity, and a home. It is the Father who does the finding. Although the Son makes the journey, it is the Father's watchful eye that truly finds him on the road. It is the Father's love that runs to him, embraces him, and brings him home. Being found is not primarily our achievement. It is our reception of God's relentless, seeking love. The Father's proclamation is the lens through which the entire story must be understood. The feast is not a reward for good behavior. It is a resurrection party. It is a welcome home from the dead celebration. This changes our understanding of sin and grace. Sin is not just the breaking of rules. It is a state of death and lostness. Grace is not just the overlooking of those broken rules. It is the power of God to raise the dead and to find the lost. This proclamation, therefore, is for everyone. We all, in our own ways, have known the far country. We have all experienced the spiritual death of a life cut off from its source. We have all been lost. And the radical good news of this story is that the Father stands ready to declare over each of us, "This child of mine was dead and is alive again, was lost and is found." And with that declaration, the music starts and the feast begins. Just as the celebration is getting underway, the parable dramatically shifts its focus. The camera, as it were, pans away from the joyful scene in the house and moves out into the fields, introducing us to the other central character in this drama. Now his elder son was in the field. With this simple transition, Jesus turns the story on its head. We, the audience, have just experienced the emotional catharsis of the prodigal's return and the Father's extravagant grace. We are ready to celebrate, but Jesus wants to show us that there is another way to be lost, a way that is perhaps more subtle, more respectable, and ultimately, more tragic than the rebellion of the younger brother. The elder son is introduced to us through his defining characteristic. He is dutiful. He is in the field, which is exactly where he is supposed to be. He is working. He is responsible. He is the model son who never caused his father a day of trouble. He did not demand his inheritance. He did not run off to a distant country. He stayed home. He obeyed the rules. He fulfilled his obligations. On the surface, he is everything the younger son was not. He is the picture of filial piety and moral rectitude. If the younger son represents the lostness of rebellion, the elder son represents the lostness of self-righteousness. He is physically close to the Father, living under the same roof, but as we will soon discover, his heart is in a far country of its own. His lostness is an internal exile. He is lost not in a pigsty, but in the field of his own joyless labor. He is a man who has meticulously kept the letter of the law, but has completely missed its spirit. His relationship with his father is not one of love and trust, but one of contract and transaction. He sees himself not as a son enjoying the fellowship of his father, but as a servant toiling for a wage. His obedience is not a joyful response to love. It is a grim and resentful means of earning his keep and proving his own worth. This character is Jesus' direct address to the Pharisees and scribes who were his immediate audience. They were the ones who were grumbling because Jesus welcomed sinners and ate with them. They were the elder brothers of their day. They were meticulously religious, outwardly righteous, and deeply proud of their moral and theological correctness. They defined themselves by their separation from the sinners, the prodigals of their society. But in their pride and their rigid adherence to the rules, they had become blind to the heart of God, a heart of grace and mercy that rejoices over the return of the lost. The elder son's tragedy is that he is in the Father's house, but does not know the Father's heart. He has access to all the Father's possessions, but he lives in a state of spiritual poverty. He is surrounded by the abundance of his inheritance, but his soul is starving for the joy and intimacy that he has never allowed himself to experience. His righteousness has become a prison, a wall that separates him from his father, from his brother, and from the possibility of grace. As he walks home from the field, tired from a long day of work, He is about to come face to face with a reality that his rigid, rule-based worldview cannot comprehend. He is about to encounter a celebration that, to him, will seem like the greatest injustice imaginable. His story serves as a solemn warning that it is possible to be geographically close to God, to be active in religious duties, to have a perfect record of outward obedience, and yet to be completely, utterly, and tragically lost. As the elder son approaches the house after a long day of dutiful labor in the field, his senses are met with an unexpected and jarring reality. And as he came and drew near to the house, he heard music and dancing, the sounds of celebration, of joy, of a great feast, spill out from his home. For a man whose life is defined by predictable rhythms of work and duty, this spontaneous eruption of merriment is a profound disruption of the natural order of things. His first reaction is not one of curious joy, but of confusion and suspicion. He does not rush in to join the party. Instead, he remains outside, an observer, an outsider to the joy that is taking place within his own home. The very fact that he needs to ask for an explanation reveals the depth of his alienation. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. A son in a healthy, intimate relationship with his father would have known what was happening, or at the very least, would have felt free to go directly to his father and ask. But the elder son does not go to his father. He stops a servant. This is a subtle but telling detail. It shows that his relationship with his father is formal and distant. He relates to his father's household through intermediaries, much like an employee relates to a CEO. He is not a participant in the inner life of the family. He is an observer of its external activities. He is on the outside looking in, both literally and figuratively. The servant's reply is simple, factual, and devastating to the elder son's worldview. And he said to him, "Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him safe and sound." The servant's report contains the core elements of the good news. The brother has returned, the father has welcomed him with an extravagant feast, and the reason for the celebration is simple and profound. He who is lost has been received back, safe and sound. The Greek word for safe and sound means in good health. It signifies a complete restoration, a healing of the brokenness. But what the servant reports as good news, the elder son hears as an outrageous injustice. The music and dancing, which should have been a call to join in the family's joy, become for him a symphony of everything that is wrong with his world. They are the soundtrack to his father's foolishness and his brother's undeserved reward. The irony is staggering. The younger son, who had been physically in a far country, is now on the inside, at the heart of the celebration, fully reconciled and restored. The elder son, who has never physically left home, is now firmly on the outside, separated from the father's joy by a wall of his own making. He is an exile in his own backyard. This scene powerfully illustrates the isolating nature of a legalistic and self-righteous mindset. A person who lives by a strict code of merit and reward cannot comprehend the logic of grace. To the elder son, life is a ledger book of debits and credits. He has spent his life making deposits of obedience and hard work, and he expects a return on his investment. His brother has only made withdrawals, squandering his share and living a life of sin. The celebration of his brother's return does not compute in his moral calculus. It is an error, a gross miscalculation, a violation of the fundamental laws of fairness as he understands them. The party, which is the ultimate symbol of the father's inclusive and joyful love, becomes for the elder son the ultimate symbol of his own exclusion. He cannot enter the joy because his heart is not in tune with the Father's heart. He is standing at the threshold of grace, but he is unable to cross it because he is shackled by his own sense of justice and entitlement. The elder son's response to the servant's news is not joy, relief, or even curiosity. It is a swift and violent emotional reaction. But he was angry and refused to go in. This is a pivotal moment that lays bare the true condition of his heart. The joy of the Father's house, the celebration of his brother's return from the dead, has the paradoxical effect of filling him with rage. His anger is not a fleeting annoyance. It is a deep, settled, and principled indignation. It leads him to an act of passive rebellion. He refuses to enter the party. He stages a protest on the doorstep, a public demonstration of his disapproval. What is the source of this profound anger? At its core, it is a poisoned sense of justice. The elder son believes in a world of fairness, a world where people get what they deserve. In his mind, his brother deserves punishment, condemnation, and shame. He certainly does not deserve a party. The fatted calf, the music, the dancing, these are all symbols of an unmerited reward, and this unmerited reward feels like a personal invalidation of his entire life. His own life of dutiful service suddenly seems meaningless. If his brother can receive such a welcome after such a life, then what was the point of his own obedience? His anger is fueled by a bitter sense of comparison. He has spent his life measuring himself against his brother and judging himself to be superior. Now, the father's actions have completely upended this hierarchy. The sinner is being treated like a saint, the righteous is being ignored, and the very foundations of his self-worth are being shaken. This anger is the classic reaction of the legalist when confronted with grace. The legalist believes that God's love is a limited commodity that must be earned and carefully distributed according to merit. Grace, which lavishes love on the undeserving, is seen as a threat to this ordered system. It is perceived as cheap, unfair, and dangerous. It devalues the hard work of the righteous and encourages the irresponsibility of the wicked. This was precisely the argument of the Pharisees. They were angry that Jesus was wasting his time and his holiness on tax collectors and sinners. They believed these people should be shunned, not celebrated. They, like the elder son, could not comprehend a God whose joy was found in the restoration of the broken, rather than in the affirmation of the righteous. The elder son's refusal to go in is a powerful symbolic act. He is excommunicating himself from the fellowship of grace. He is choosing his own righteousness over a relationship with his father and brother. He would rather be right and alone outside than be part of a celebration that offends his sense of justice. His anger has blinded him to the miracle that has taken place. He cannot see that his brother was dead and is now alive. He can only see that a rule has been broken, that fairness has been violated. He is so focused on the ledger book of sin that he cannot hear the music of redemption. This is the tragic prison of self-righteousness. It locks a person into a small, cold world of scorekeeping and resentment, and it makes them incapable of participating in the warm, expansive, and joyful feast of God's grace. The elder son stands outside the party, a solitary figure consumed by a righteous anger that is slowly eating him alive, a stark and solemn warning to all who believe that God can be managed by our own efforts and controlled by our own sense of what is fair. The father, in the midst of hosting the greatest celebration his household has ever known, becomes aware of the crisis unfolding on his doorstep. His elder son, his dutiful and responsible heir, is outside, consumed by anger and refusing to join the feast. The father's response is a mirror image of his earlier action toward his younger son, demonstrating the consistent and impartial nature of his pursuing love. The text tells us, his father came out and began to plead with him. Let us savor the beauty and significance of this act. The father, the host of the party, the patriarch of the family, once again takes the initiative. He could have sent a servant. He could have ignored his son's sullen protest, assuming he would come to his senses eventually. He could have become angry himself, demanding that his son show him respect and come inside immediately. He would have been within his rights to do any of these things. But he does not. Instead, he leaves the party. He leaves the warmth, the light, the music, and the joy, and he goes out into the darkness to meet his son where he is. This is the second time in the story that the father has gone out. He ran out to meet the prodigal on the road, and now he walks out to meet the Pharisee on the patio. His love is not limited to one kind of lostness. He actively pursues both the rebellious sinner and the resentful saint. His grace is for the son in the pigsty and for the son in the field. He is the father of two lost sons, and his heart longs for both of them to be inside, sharing in his joy. The father began to plead with him. The original Greek implies a gentle, patient, and persistent entreaty. He is not commanding, he is inviting. He is not condemning the son for his anger, he is trying to understand it and to reason with him. This is a picture of incredible humility and patience. The father, who holds all the authority, condescends to plead with his child. He honors the son's feelings, even if they are misguided, and he opens a dialogue, hoping to bridge the emotional chasm that is open between them. This is a stunning portrait of God's disposition toward those of us who, like the elder brother, find ourselves trapped in a mindset of legalism and resentment. God does not strike us down for our prideful anger. He does not abandon us to our self-imposed isolation. He comes out to us. He meets us in our spiritual coldness, in the darkness of our judgment, and he gently pleads with us. He invites us to see things from his perspective, to understand the joy of grace, to lay down our ledgers and our grievances, and come into the feast. The Father's plea is an invitation to shift from a mindset of justice to a mindset of celebration. He is asking his son to stop focusing on what his brother deserves and to start focusing on the miracle of his brother's return. He is asking him to share in the Father's own emotional reality, which is one of overwhelming joy and relief. But the elder son is so wrapped up in his own sense of being wronged that he cannot hear the heart of his father's plea. The father's gentle love is about to collide with the wall of bitterness and accusation, revealing the tragic depth of the son's alienation. The scene is now set for the final confrontation of the parable, a dialogue in the dark between a father whose heart is overflowing with grace and a son whose heart is shriveled with a sense of justice, a dialogue that will lay bare the two competing economies of the human soul. The father's gentle plea, intended to soften his son's heart and invite him into the joy of the feast, instead has the opposite effect. It opens the floodgates of a long-simmering torrent of bitterness, resentment, and accusation. The elder son finally unloads the grievances he has been nursing for years. His response is a masterclass in self-pity and relational breakdown. Look, these many years I have served you, and I never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat, that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed for him the fatted calf. This speech is a diagnostic of a soul that is completely lost in the transactional mindset of a servant, not the relational mindset of a son. Let us break it down. He begins with look, an attention-grabbing, almost accusatory, opening. Then he describes his own life. These many years I have served you. The word he chooses is crucial. He does not say, I have lived with you, or I have loved you, or I have been your son. He says, I have served you. The Greek word is for the service of a slave. In his own mind, his entire life has been one of joyless, slavish toil for a demanding master. He sees his father not as a loving parent, but as a boss, and his home not as a place of belonging, but as a place of employment. He continues to build his case, and I never disobeyed your command. He presents his perfect record of obedience not as a source of joy or connection, but as a bargaining chip. His righteousness is a tool he uses to justify himself and to obligate his father. He believes his flawless performance has earned him a certain reward, which he now complains he has never received. Yet you never gave me even a young goat, that I might celebrate with my friends. His complaint reveals his profound spiritual poverty. He feels deprived, overlooked, and unappreciated. He cannot see that everything the Father has belongs to him. He is focused on the one small thing he perceives he has been denied, a goat for a party with his friends, while being completely blind to the vast inheritance that is already his. His desire to celebrate with my friends also reveals his alienation. He does not think of celebrating with his family, with his father. His joy, if he were to have any, would be found elsewhere, with his own crowd, separate from the life of the household. The core of his bitterness is revealed in the bitter contrast he draws with his brother. He cannot even bring himself to say, my brother. Instead, he spits out the words, this son of yours, contemptuously disowning his sibling and pushing the problem onto his father. He then lays out his brother's crimes in the most lurid terms possible. who has devoured your property with prostitutes." The text never mentioned prostitutes. This is the elder son's own angry, judgmental embellishment. He is painting his brother in the worst possible light to highlight the injustice of the situation. Finally, he delivers the punchline, the evidence of the father's outrageous unfairness. "You killed for him the fatted calf." The fatted calf, the symbol of the father's ecstatic joy, is, for the elder son, the ultimate symbol of his father's betrayal. The speech is a portrait of a heart consumed by jealousy, scorekeeping, and a profound misunderstanding of love. He sees relationship as a zero-sum game. The grace shown to his brother is, in his eyes, a resource that has been stolen from him. He cannot rejoice in his brother's restoration because he is too busy calculating his own perceived losses. He has kept all the rules, but he has missed the entire point. The point was never the service or the obedience in themselves. The point was the relationship with the Father. And by turning his obedience into a tool of self-justification and grievance, he has built a wall that has cut him off from the very love he so desperately and unknowingly craves. The father listens patiently to his son's bitter and accusatory tirade. He does not become defensive. He does not rebuke his son for his disrespect or his false accusations. Instead, his reply is one of astonishing tenderness, a gentle and heartbreaking attempt to reframe his son's entire understanding of his identity and his life. The father says, "Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours." This statement is the theological and emotional core of the second half of the parable. It is a quiet, devastatingly simple, and profoundly loving correction to the elder son's entire worldview. Let us analyze the father's words with care. He begins by addressing him as son. The Greek word is teknon, a term of endearment like "my child." Even in the face of his son's rage and resentment, the father's first instinct is to affirm the relationship, to speak with affection. He is reminding the son of his true identity, an identity the son himself has forgotten. The son sees himself as a slave, but the father sees him as a beloved child. The first part of the father's statement, "You are always with me," directly addresses the son's feeling of being overlooked and unappreciated. The father is saying, "Our relationship is not defined by occasional rewards or parties. The greatest gift, the greatest reward, is our constant fellowship. You have had the one thing your brother has desperately missed, my presence. You have been here with me, day in and day out. How can you see that as a burden and not a blessing?" The father is trying to shift the son's focus from the transactional, what he gets, to the relational, who he is with. The real inheritance was not the property, but the uninterrupted communion with the Father, a communion the elder son had taken for granted and failed to enjoy. The second part of the statement is even more stunning, "and all that is mine is yours." This is a direct refutation of the son's complaint about never being given a young goat. The father is essentially saying, "A goat? You are complaining about a goat? You could have had a goat any time you wanted. You could have had the fatted calf. You don't have to ask me for a gift, because you are not a servant. You are a co-owner. Everything I have, the land, the livestock, the entire estate, already belongs to you. You have been living as a pauper in a palace, as a slave with the keys to the kingdom in your pocket." This reveals the tragic depth of the elder son's lostness. He was legally and positionally rich, but he was experientially and emotionally impoverished. He had full access to the father's resources, but he lived with a mindset of scarcity and deprivation because he did not understand the nature of sonship. He was waiting for his father to give him things, not realizing that it was all already his to enjoy. His joyless, dutiful service was entirely self-imposed. The father never saw him as a slave. The father was not withholding his love or his possessions. The elder son was the one who had created the distance, who had put himself in the emotional position of a hired hand. The father's words are both a gentle rebuke and a gracious invitation. They are a rebuke to the son's slave mentality, to his scorekeeping, and to his self-pity. But they are also a profound invitation to step into the reality of his sonship, to wake up to the riches that have surrounded him all along, and to start living as the heir that he truly is. The father is trying to open his eyes to the fact that the real party, the real feast, is the daily reality of being a beloved child in the Father's house. It is a feast that the elder son has been invited to every single day of his life, but one he has consistently refused to attend. Having gently corrected his son's flawed understanding of sonship and inheritance, the father now addresses the immediate issue at hand, the party for the younger brother. He provides the final, beautiful, and compelling reason why celebration is not just an option, but a necessity. He says, "It was fitting to celebrate and be glad, for this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." In this concluding statement, the father invites his elder son to see the situation not through his own narrow lens of fairness and merit, but through the expansive, divine lens of resurrection and redemption. The father begins by stating that celebration is fitting. The Greek word suggests that it is right, necessary, and morally obligatory. He is saying that in the economy of heaven, in the logic of love, joy is the only possible response to what has happened. To not celebrate would be to misunderstand the very nature of the event. It would be like attending a wedding and refusing to rejoice, or seeing a newborn baby and refusing to smile. The situation itself demands gladness. The father then reframes the identity of the prodigal. The elder son had contemptuously referred to him as "this son of yours." The father gently but firmly corrects him. "This your brother." He is reminding the elder son of their shared blood, their shared history, their unbreakable bond of kinship. He is calling him back into the relationship, reminding him that the fate of this other man is inextricably tied to his own. He cannot be whole while his brother is lost. He is being invited to see the prodigal not as a rival or a sinner, but as family, as his own flesh and blood. This is a call to move from judgment to empathy, from alienation to solidarity. Finally, the father repeats the very same words he had used earlier to explain the celebration to the household: "Was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found." He is giving his elder son the same divine perspective he gave to everyone else. He is saying, "Son, you are looking at this as a matter of accounting, but you are missing the miracle. This is not about the squandering of property. It is about the reclaiming of a life. Your brother was in the land of the dead, and he has been raised. He was lost in the wilderness, and he has been brought home." How can we respond to a resurrection with anything other than a party? How can we respond to a rescue with anything other than rejoicing? This is the father's final plea. He is inviting the elder son to join the fitting response. He is inviting him to share in the father's own joy. The core conflict of the parable is laid bare in this final exchange. The elder son operates on the principle of justice. People should get what they deserve. The father operates on the principle of grace. People should be celebrated when they are brought back from the dead. The elder son sees a sinner who deserves punishment. The father sees a son who is lost and has been found. The invitation is for the elder son to lay down his own rigid, self-centered sense of what is right and to enter into the joyful, other-centered, life-giving reality of his father's love. It is an invitation to leave the cold, dark field of his own righteousness and to step into the warm, bright, music-filled house of grace. He is being asked to choose between the grim satisfaction of being right and the profound joy of being reconciled. The parable concludes with a breathtaking and deeply unsettling silence. The father has made his final, heartfelt plea. He has explained the logic of grace, the necessity of celebration, and the reality of his elder son's true identity and inheritance. He has extended the invitation to come in and join the feast. And then the story simply ends. We are left standing in the dark with the father and the elder son. We hear the music and laughter drifting from the house, a stark contrast to the tense silence on the doorstep. But we are never told what the elder son does. Does he allow his father's words to melt his heart? Does he drop his anger, embrace his brother, and enter the party? Or does he turn his back on his father's plea, harden his heart, and walk back into the darkness of the field, forever a prisoner of his own righteousness? Jesus leaves the question hanging in the air unanswered. And this open ending is the genius of the parable. The story is not ultimately about what a fictional character did 2,000 years ago. It is about us. The unresolved ending transforms the parable from a story to be heard into a question to be answered. The final scene holds up a mirror to every person who hears it, and it asks, "What will you do?" The choice is no longer the elder son's, it is ours. We are the ones left standing on the threshold. The story has revealed to us two fundamental ways of being lost. We can be lost in the far country of rebellion, like the younger son, chasing after freedom and pleasure only to find ourselves in a pigsty of our own making, starving for a home we once rejected. Or we can be lost in the home country of self-righteousness, like the elder son, meticulously obeying the rules and performing our duties, only to find our hearts filled with bitterness and our souls strangers to joy. Both sons are alienated from the Father's heart. Both are in desperate need of grace. And the story shows us that there is only one way home for both of them, through the scandalous, pursuing, and extravagant love of the Father, who runs to the prodigal and pleads with the Pharisee. The central question the parable leaves us with is this: can we accept a God who is this gracious? Can we live in a world where forgiveness is this free, where grace is this unfair? Can we handle a Father who throws a party for the people we think deserve to be punished? And can we accept that we, too, are desperately in need of that same grace, whether our sins are of the spectacular, rebellious kind or the quiet, respectable, soul-killing kind? Will we, like the younger son, come to our senses, confess our need, and allow ourselves to be embraced and welcomed home? Or will we, like the elder son, stand outside the party, clinging to our sense of fairness, our grievances, and our own righteousness, and in so doing, miss the joy of the kingdom? The story of the prodigal son is a story for everyone who feels lost, because it shows us that we are all, in some way, lost. But more than that, it is a story for everyone who wants to be found, because it reveals a Father who is more interested in finding us than we are in being found, a Father whose greatest joy is to see his children, all of his children, come home to the feast. The music is playing. The fatted calf has been served. The door is open. The Father is waiting. The only remaining question is whether we will go in.